getting into this whole Conor McGregor situation again, it's where does the UFC go if they don't make this fight? It's 10:50 on Thursday night. Right now, this fight is off, and it could be on. All of this we talked about previously could be just BS at this point because McGregor and Diaz could be back on by the press conference tomorrow. But where do they go if they don't have this fight?
I mean, where can you go? What are you going to do?
Canada.
I mean, honestly, though, what can you right now? You've got Tate right now was the right?
I don't know what the co-main event is.
Wait, the code hasn't even been announced yet, right?
Yes, White said on SportsCenter he was working on 2 fights. One, I'm guessing, which could have been the co-main event, and then whatever the replacement main event was.
But Tate Nunes is on that card right now, right? Is that 200 or is that something else? Am I thinking of?
No, Tate Nunes is on 200. You're right.
So we got that one on 200 now. There's still 2 fights now. They're going to have to make those 2 blockbuster fights if they can't do here. And then, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit. And something that I don't think is going to happen, but here's a monkey wrench. What if OSP wins?
Oh, my gosh. I mean,
everybody's looking at it and going, okay, John Jones should have an easy fight, be ready for 200. But what if they said the same thing about Rousey and Holm?
It's so weird to think because when you look at I wrote this in the 3 reasons why it's funny when you look on our website it says 3 reasons why John Jones will win and 3 reasons why Vince St. Preux can win. Because when you look at the article I wrote about Vince St. Preux, number 1, you don't know how hard it is to figure out 3 reasons why somebody can beat John Jones.
Hey, I told you my reason.
Like it's really, really difficult. One of the most difficult things I've had to do for a site. But this puts the UFC in real trouble if it's not McGregor. Because Diaz probably wants to be on that card. He wants the payday. And it would screw him over. He's doing everything. He's showing up on time, which is a miracle for Nate Diaz.
Isn't it funny? He's looking like the angel in all this.
I know. That's the craziest. Out of all this stuff, Nate Diaz and the Diaz
Let me ask you this.
Next.
Does Diaz get a title shot then out of this if McGregor doesn't go?
But the problem is Diaz isn't a welterweight. And Dos Anjos is fighting Eddie Alvarez that week on Fight Pass, which, oh, by the way, we should talk about that, but nobody cares about that.
Can we get the Lawler fight?
The Lawler-Woodley fight's been rumored now, too.
What about Lawler-Diaz? 200.
But does Nate Diaz deserve a title shot?
I'm not saying he deserves it, but hey, look, if you're going to try to make some money, you got to do something.
This is the situation they've put themselves into.
Yeah, I mean, if you got no McGregor, the next biggest fight, I think, especially because you got Diaz has been working for 170 a catch weight.
Yeah, I mean, the next biggest fight is Diaz GSP or Lawler GSP.
Yeah, but do you want? I don't know, man. I don't know. Look, I know everybody GSP. I want to see him back in there, but I don't know. Look, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get with GSP in this fight. Do you make that your main event?
The backup main event has to be Jones Cormier if Jones wins. That's the only thing, and it's a loss because you see this and you think, how did they not figure this out beforehand? Is it really Conor McGregor pulling this diva attitude?
Well, you remember we talked about this. We said, they're putting all their eggs in these baskets, and what happens if the baskets start falling off? Rousey fell off.
Yeah.
And now McGregor's starting to fall off, and their backups, I believe, at one point was Northcutt and Paige Van Zandt. That got derailed.
Yeah, Tage Northcutt is on that card, though, but he's fighting a tough Latin America 3, finalist. You have to. The UFC has to realize this, and I just can't believe that they're going to go through with this. I don't get it.
Yeah, but again, we go back to this. We're kind of, going back and forth on it. It's another game of, hey, mine's bigger than yours, but they've already said UFC is no fighter is bigger than the UFC. If they go back on it, there's a fighter that's bigger than the UFC.
It's such a weird thing. I don't really understand the mindset. I don't know how this wasn't figured out beforehand. If this is a giant work, then it's fantastic. But if it's not, this is, I mean, the UFC they just look bad. Because Conor McGregor's statement he put out today was, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's pretty heartfelt. Cry for a guy who's making hand over fist every time he fights. But it looks reasonable, and you're not you can't paint him out to be this crazy guy.
I mean, no, you can't. But at the same time, is it unreasonable for UFC to think that, wait a minute? I mean, if we do it for you, then we got to do it from a business standpoint. I mean, you can also see it from the UFC side.
And this is the problem. There's no one in the UFC like Conor McGregor. So you have to realize special people get special treatment. That's the way the world works. It sucks, but that's the way the world works. We saw this with the Chicago Bulls a week ago when players were complaining about Jimmy Butler getting special treatment. Well, guess what? Jimmy Butler's the best player on that terrible team. So, yeah, stars are going to get better treatment. I'm sorry. Like, I don't get, like, if McGregor's still going to do the press conference in New York, you can work around it. You can book around that. You can do everybody in Las Vegas. You do Diaz solo in Stockton. You do McGregor solo in New York. There's ways to make it work. And the inflexibility just screams to me like this is a giant ego check, and they're not willing to make the most money in the end, because that's what the UFC is a business. If you want to make the most money, you have to go out and sometimes do things you don't want to do.
But let me ask you this now: are they worried that maybe they're worried that this fight might not sell like last time, so they want both of them to be there so you can get that whole? Remember, McGregor is a showman.
Yes.
He feeds off the other guy being there. We saw him. He jumped over, grabbed the belt from Aldo, did the thing. He gets under people's skin. Is he going to be as good by himself? Is that what UFC's worried about?
You're going to let an Irish dude who's got an ego the size of the Empire State Building sit in Madison Square Garden and pontificate for a half hour with reporters asking him questions? I think it would work out pretty good.
I would, but apparently UFC, I think, is I mean, again, I'm just playing, that look, they're a business too, so they got to go. If you do this, and I can understand what you're saying, where, guys are going to get special, preparation, I'm sorry, yeah. and thing like that, but at what point you got to stop the bleeding? You got to stop the bleeding. If it's say it's whatever, it's $10 million this fight. What is it next fight? What is it the fight after that? What is it the fight after that? Where does it stop? And then other fighters start adding it in. Where does it stop? I know UFC's making money hand over fist, and I understand most of the fighters aren't. But look, you're agreeing to these contracts. You're agreeing to the fights. So you can't really be all that upset if you're agreeing to this.
And that's the thing. If he's backing out on the contract thing, I understand where the UFC's coming from. I just think they have to realize that they're not the ones with the power in this situation for the first time in the history of the promotion.
But see, they think they are.
And that's why we're here. And this is why we're here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talking about this on a Thursday night in April for a July fight.
Isn't that hilarious?
It's so funny. A lot of people are forgetting to laugh.
Yeah. And the worst part about it is it's no longer a fight in July, apparently.
I mean, yeah, it's not a fight at this point. Yeah, you go on the UFC's website like I did today. It's to be announced versus to be determined as the main event.
Oh, I love those two TBAs against TBD.
I really hope they figure out a way to put this fight together, because not only is it the biggest moneymaker, fans all of a sudden are very into this fight, which, I mean, if this was a work to try to get this fight to have interest, I mean, you got national television, sports television opinionists, if you will, talking about this who have never seen a UFC fight. You're getting major coverage, breaking news in the Sports Center. This is the biggest thing in sports right now. And UFC is rarely the biggest thing in the world. And they should take advantage of this opportunity and not let it pass it by. Because, man, if this fight goes by the wayside and they lose out on tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars because of this, this is going to be looked back upon as a major misstep, regardless of the precedent it could set for the UFC. I just don't get it. I really don't understand it.
Well, I mean, again, I think it goes back to, you talk about how big Conor McGregor's ego is. How big is, Fertitta and Dana White and them? They have to believe that their product is bigger than every fighter. And I think they're seeing that maybe we got a little chink in this armor. Yeah. But you can't go back on what you said. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine if they go back on what they said right now? Could you imagine the tweets that will be out there tomorrow? Honestly, think about this. Cowboy Cerrone, what do you think his first tweet's going to be? Cal Sonnen, what do you think his tweet's going to be?
You have to be prepared to deal with the backlash, or you don't do this in public.
Well, it's too late now.
That's the problem. Like, if this was such a big issue, you solve this. You don't let this get out to this point.
But then let me ask you this, though, because how do they know that Conor McGregor was going to come out and do this?
Obviously,
Conor McGregor pushed the issue by coming out and saying, hey, I'm retiring. Thanks for the cheese, y'all.
Well, I think there were some negotiations before, like the week, from what I've read, a week before this is when it started kind of happening. And if you didn't solve it, you're just exposing yourself to this. And it's funny. Ariel Helwani brought this up on a podcast with the Ringer's David Shoemaker yesterday. I thought it was pretty interesting. When Conor talks about the UFC, he talks about the Fertittas and I'm making money with Lorenzo. How often does he talk about Dana White? Not that often. So McGregor's shooting for the top, and nobody talks about the Fertittas like McGregor does. So this is it. McGregor realizes the promotional power that he has, and it's much different compared to any other fighter. And White's coming out on SportsCenter and saying, "Oh, we pulled him for this, we pulled him." It doesn't look like he goes on Colin Cowherd, and Cowherd softballing him questions to make the UFC look great, and it just does. It comes off as like it doesn't come off well. I don't know. That's my opinion on them.
No, I mean, I can agree with your end of it. I just also think that they are looking at it as their business, and the problem they've made for themselves is they've painted themselves in a corner because I don't think they thought that a fighter would be able to get bigger than the UFC, but they have allowed a fighter to get bigger than the UFC, and they forgot one thing. There's this thing called social media.
Yeah.
That wasn't around back in the day. And I don't think Dave, and again, I don't say they because, again, Dana White uses social media, UFC uses social media, great. But I don't know if they understood the power that one tweet had.
It's amazing. And before we tap off this segment and then talk about, I don't know, Mighty Mouse and John Jones, possibly the two best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, I'll give you an update on how many retweets the Conor McGregor "thanks for the cheese" retirement tweet has. It's up to 170,000 and 140,000 likes. Like, this is the power that one fighter has, and it's pretty scary, and it scares the hell out of the UFC.